Hello and welcome to Heartbeat. This week, Catherine sits down for an interview with pro-life campaigner Bernadette Smyth.
29 years ago, I never really thought about abortion. I didn't really see it as an issue because it wasn't an issue 29 years ago in Northern Ireland. But I went to a conference in Dublin. I picked up a brochure. There was a picture of a little baby boy who had been aborted. And it just changed my life in a split second. Um, and that's where I formed Precious Life.
I'll have a roundup of news from home and abroad, and Ben gives us his viewpoint on the collapse of our Christian civilization.
Bernadette Smyth is a pro-life activist based in Belfast and the founder and director of the organisation Precious Life, established in 1997. Over nearly 3 decades, she has led the group in public campaigning on abortion-related issues across Northern Ireland and beyond, becoming one of the region's most visible and influential pro-life voices. Bernadette has appeared in interviews and public discussions, including media features and online broadcasts, where she speaks about her activism. Through Precious Life, she's also been involved in community outreach events and advocacy work focused on promoting her organisation's mission. And Bernadette joins me now. Okay, so thank you, Bernadette, for joining me. And can you share with our viewers what led you to, I suppose, enter into the pro-life movement to help mothers and unborn children?
Well, 29 years ago, I was working in retail. I was a supervisor, training as a manager for fashion retail. I worked for River Island, so I was very much happy and content. I had a few children. I'd been married a number of years. I was very much into my faith, but never really thought about abortion. I didn't really see it as an issue because it wasn't an issue 29 years ago in Northern Ireland. But I went to a conference in Dublin, and it was a Divine Mercy conference. It was a religious conference, and I was leading a Divine Mercy prayer group in my own parish, and so I went to hear some speakers. And during that conference, I picked up a brochure, and during one of the intervals, after one of the talks, I opened the brochure, and there was a picture of a little baby boy who had been aborted. And it just changed my life in a split second. As I looked into the little baby face, and his body was all bruised and bloody. And I thought, what is this? How could someone do this to a child? And even looking at the picture, my youngest child at that time was 1.5 or something, and my other girls were up a wee bit. They were like 5 and 7 or something. And like I'd had ultrasounds, I knew all about fetal development, but I never really thought about abortion because it wasn't ever something we needed to talk about, because at that time, unknown to me, I didn't realise that the Labour government, Tony Blair, was leading the government, who had voted on 3 occasions to legalise abortion up to birth here, and by introducing, the 1967 Abortion Act. But anyway, I left that conference totally transformed. I came home. There was a lot of things in between. I came home. I showed the image to my husband. He was equally devastated. Both of us were shocked. I went to my prayer group on the Tuesday night after the weekend conference. And after the prayer group, we met for coffee and we chatted, and I showed the image around, and everybody was like horrified. So you could say Precious Life was formed from that prayer group. At that time, like, I was just an ordinary person, happy enough in my life, looking at rearing up children, married, and went to was happy with work, but something just kept prompting me, and I started to really pray for discernment, and I realized that it was something. My life was totally changed. I could never go back to before after seeing that image. I could never go back. I just thought, how could I live in a world that was killing children? In fact, I contacted a couple of the SPUCTV members here in Northern Ireland, Rita Brennan, and asked her more about the politics of it all. Because I never watched the news then, because I was probably busy feeding children, looking at being a mummy and so on. So I don't really know much about politics or anything. So I met with Rita, and she came and spoke to some of the group, prayer group. And we started to learn more about the Labour government, what UK 67 Abortion Act, British Act. And so then within a few weeks then there was a conference in Dublin. I'd signed a form and to say I'd like more information. And I went, gathered up some of my friends and colleagues and from the prayer group. And we went to Dublin. And that's where I formed Precious Life, along with, at that time, it was Youth Defence, now Life Institute. So I've been working alongside, the other pro-life groups in Ireland, specifically Life Institute. So that really was like me becoming an activist. I set up a street stall in Cornmarket 29 years ago. That street stall has been there every single Saturday for 29 years. So that's where at the moment we're under major threat to stop pro-life outreach in Belfast. And I suppose that's why we're having the Rally for Life, Liberty and Faith on the 4th of July. Because not only do they want, the government wants to kill unborn children, they want to stop us defending them also, as you know, with buffer zones that started out in Northern Ireland and the UK, the rest of the UK, and in the Republic of Ireland. And now they want to silence the voice of Christians, of pro-lifers. They want to curtail what we do and really let the babies die without a fight. So,
Bernadette, can you tell us a bit more about that then, specifically in Northern Ireland? When it comes to life issues, what is actually happening for those of us who are not aware?
Well, I mean, if you look back to, we now have the buffer zones in 2023 that were passed at Stormont. So up until 2023, you could say for the last 24 or 5 years, we prayed outside abortion referral agencies until abortion was forced in by the British government in 2019 and implemented in 2020. So we were praying outside all these hospitals, all these agencies, and the buffer zones were introduced, and now they're also have expanded to the UK and Ireland. So what we're seeing now is Northern Ireland is being used to push in draconian laws that would curtail our freedom of speech. And that's really what happened in 2023 past. The Belfast City Council wanted to introduce, you could say exclusion zones, bylaws to stop Christians from preaching on the street, to prevent groups like Precious Life, who are the only active group here on the street, every week giving out information, talking to the public. So they voted on the pro-abortion parties, who are made up in the council, similar to the Stormont government. They voted to pass bylaws that would prevent Precious Life from giving out information material. From what we can read between the lines, that would include like your fetal development. They're saying you can't wear a T-shirt that depicts anything that they refer to as graphic. They like the fetal models that we have on our table, anything that would show anything related to an unborn child. Also, they're saying that Christian preachers can only preach at a limit of 70 decibel. So that would be, say, for example, our Rally for Life on the 4th of July. You would have to get a permit to speak louder than 70 decibels. So they really want to get rid of anybody on the street that's pro-life and Christian. So we're the only groups that are being targeted. They've talked about the other artists who are out at the weekend, and they say they could maybe have a permit, but that it seems to be that there might be something in the legislature, the bylaws, that would prevent someone from busking and so on. So there's a real battle waging. Thankfully, the bylaws have been challenged at the moment. The Democratic Unionist Party, along with the Ulster Unionist Party and the TUV Traditional Unionist Voice, all made a call in, which means they're challenging the bylaws under human rights legislation. Equally, we ourselves did and other groups, interested groups, participated in a consultation, and the overall outcome of the consultation was in favour of, us continuing and the Christian Voice being active on the street. So we've decided this year, in union with our colleagues in the south of Ireland, to have the Rally for Life in Belfast as opposed to Dublin. From 2007, when we formed the Rally for Life coalition, we alternated between Belfast, Dublin every other year, and then in 2018, when the referendum withdrew the legal protection to unborn children, the Rally for Life has been in Dublin. But this year, we feel we need to have it here because our liberties are under threat. Obviously, we're seeing now in the south of Ireland over 50,000 children have been lost to abortion, and here over 1,100 little ones are now dead because of the law here that was forced on Northern Ireland against the wishes of the people. So
how are you getting around the restrictions then, Bernadette? How are the people getting around the restrictions? You said you're out every Saturday for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, we're out every day somewhere. I mean, we have prayer vigil outside the Daisy Hill Hospital in Newry. We had one earlier today at the City Hall. We're able to, and other hospitals in Derry, the Alpnagarland, we're able to go there. We can still witness within the area. We're still doing what we were doing prior to the buffer zone legislation. I think the worst thing that really affected Precious Life was the Colley Street in Belfast, where we were able to engage with women who were using. We'd saved so many lives there. We were able to give the women helpline numbers. The difference here in Northern Ireland, probably than England, might be similar in Scotland. Most of the abortions are performed in hospitals. Every hospital here in Northern Ireland is an abortion centre, is an abortion facility, bar the one here in the city centre. So we go as close as possible. We pray, we witness with our signs. So we're still doing what we were doing before. We haven't stopped. We just can't engage the same way we would have done with the women. I mean, so many babies are alive because for all those years we were able to be present to those women. But what we do now is, because we have the Starting Healthcare Pregnancy Centre, we have to work harder because we need to get the woman here. So we're in the process of moving to a new location, so it's very exciting. Brand new office. We're moving hopefully in August. So we will increase that outreach through better Google ads and try to get as many women to us. So we're doing it differently. We're doing it a wee bit differently than what we were doing. We can still go out on Saturday afternoon. We do the road shows every year. We do the different towns, like this Saturday we're in Belfast and Derry, advertising for the Rally for Life and encouraging people on the street talking about the issue, bypassing the media. And you can change hearts and minds. We know that that's the only way we have to do what we have to do, regardless of what the government says, what laws are in place.
And what do you think people misunderstood about the pro-life movement?
Well, I think that it's great to have the conversations. I mean, I'm getting a lot older now than I was when I started out. And we have Youth for Life who are re-established now. And so we're trying to create more of get the young people back out again. The conversations are very interesting, I find, on the street, because everyone is just like, they buy into the slogans, where when you can have the conversation with a person, challenge them on the humanity of the unborn child. Is the child a person? What stage of the development? You can't really change the narrative by being there. And I because I started out on the street as an activist, it's just something, it's in my blood. It's just something I know works. I've had women coming up to me over the years saying, you're that girl. I see you here all the time. When I was pregnant and I was thinking of having an abortion, I took one of your leaflets. And you have women coming back, or you have grandmothers saying, I took that leaflet because my granddaughter was considering an abortion and I showed her it, and so on. So we know we make a difference. We change, you have to change those arguments by bringing truth right.
Well, you're present there. You're present. I think your presence has impact, Bernadette. You're such a gift. But I'm sure going out, especially as a woman going out in the streets, is not easy. It's like you're up against a lot of
I don't know,
unhappy people who are not happy to see you.
I've grown tough skin over the years. I've been called Hitler. I've been called every name under the sun, and you sort of it's amazing how you learn to turn the other cheek. And, you learn to offer up and just accept the fact that, you're defending little ones who can't defend themselves, and they may attack you by, verbally or, physically, which has happened. But we can live to tell the tale. The babies that we try to defend can't. So like it is a self-offering. And I know that was the calling that God placed in my heart 29 years ago. And I've never changed that pain in my heart after seeing that little baby. I'm thinking of my own little children, went back to my little boy who was 1.5 or so at the time. And I thought of his, the preciousness of every child. And so I've never lost that real, in sort of, would you call it, that sort of heart-wrenching moment that just drives me. And you just know, we all know, those of us in the movement know that, it is a calling. And regardless of the persecution, it doesn't really matter, because we're not persecuted to death as the babies are. And if we can save even one baby from that horror, it's worth it. But we can save not just one, we can save so many,
So would there ever be a time where you felt like giving up, or...
Well, there's times I feel like I'd like to run to the hills. I might like to say, can I set up Slemish Mountain, or can I go on a retreat and never come back again? But I know once you realise there are moments where you just have to maybe take a few days off, go on a retreat, go on holidays, which I love to go on holidays, and take time to refresh yourself. And I feel... spiritually, having your spiritual life in order is very, very important. I mean, you don't have to be spiritual or religious to be in the pro-life movement. We all understand that. We're all at different levels. For me personally, it would be like going on a retreat and just being filled back up again, or have rest, or switch your brain off. And come back to it again. When I think back to 29 years of doing this, and I have brought up 4 children through, I now have 7 grandchildren and another wee one on the way. Well, I suppose I have 8 grandchildren. I haven't seen this little one yet, only in a scan. And I just think that, God gives you the energy that you need. But yeah, there are times, that you just feel, I can't do it anymore. But then again, get rested and you just wipe yourself down and say, shut up and get on with it, because you're not the one, you're not the baby in the womb that's threatened, and I always say, while I have breath, while God gives me, that health to do what he calls me to do, we'll just do it.
You mentioned earlier, at the start of the interview, you mentioned about discernment. How much of the pro-life movement is a spiritual battle? And can you specifically go in a little bit onto discernment?
Discernment.
Yeah, within the spiritual battle of pro-life movement.
Oh, yeah. Well, I sort of knew then. I really, really prayed. I actually did 9 days of prayer when I was thinking about what God had called me to do. And I think everybody thought my head was turned, because I spoke to my colleagues at work and I said, well, I'm really praying because I'm thinking of giving up my job. My husband, thank God, such a good guy. We're married now 42 years nearly. So even going back all those years, but going into the discernment period, I just really took time, and I really prayed for 9 days every day. And I said, if this is for me, I want a sign. So I did get the sign. It's personal. And I knew then I gave my notice in. I left my job without any financial support or knowledge of how I was going to get money to form a pro-life group. But you could say I did step out in faith. And that is the sort of person that I would be. I stepped out in faith. And, everything happened. I'll tell you quickly, one incident happened. There was this baby's life under, it was one of the first babies that God gave me the grace to save and the means also. From my local town, this baby's life was under threat. And the girl hadn't got any money. Somebody had given me something like £300 to help buy leaflets and stuff. But this girl had no financial means, no support. She had a referral to go to England, and this friend of a friend said, if she had the financial support, she wouldn't have this abortion. So that £300 that was set aside, which was a lot 29 years ago, I spoke to my other colleagues who were dealing with the finances. Not that we had a lot, to be honest with you. And I said, I want that £300. It was somebody had donated it, and I said, because this life's at risk. And they were like, well, you can't just do that. You can't just decide just to say, look, I want that money to save this baby's life. And I know that, from a professional point of view, that we were trying to get things up and running. But to me, that life was the most important thing. So that £300 gave her money to put a deposit on her pram. It wasn't very much. We did further support her. We helped her down the line. Inside a month from doing that, I got this anonymous check from somebody for £300. And I knew those things, I knew God definitely was going to, support. And he has done, like when I said Stanton Up, I needed the financial money I needed the finances for the affiliation fee for Stanton Healthcare. And this wee elderly man who was friends of mine for years and years, he said he was praying, and he rang me and he said, I just woke up this morning and I feel so inspired to donate this money to you. And the money he donated was the exact amount that I needed to affiliate, to set Stanton Up and running, all those things. And I just say, look, your babies,
provides. And I think there's so many people that would be inspired by that story, not only for your provision, Bernadette, but for other women who are like seeing, oh God, how am I going to, have this money for this pram or this house? But like God miraculously provides. And I just, oh my gosh, that moved me so much, that story.
No, but I see that happening all the time. And I always say, God placed me, in the right marriage, security, to be able to step out in faith and to do what we do and just say, well, these are God's babies. Does he not want to save them? Does he not want to save them more? So he can help us do what we do. And I've always found that, like, looking for this office at the moment, and like, we really do need a new office because this office here is so old and the building's sold. And you know what? I really, really prayed for the office, and I went to view it, and the number is 9. So I'm thinking, right, 9, that's a good heavenly number. 9 days in the 9 cars of angels. I want that office. So I said, right. So we went up and we prayed around it, quietly prayed, went in, viewed the office, came out and prayed again and said, right, okay, we're claiming this office. And this week, I got the email from the agent to say the landlord has accepted your offer, your bid for this property. And it's so good because now we'll get the Rally for Life over in July, and then we'll get a week off, to recuperate. And then we start preparing for the move the start of August. So all these things, but, why would we not believe that God is, a way step ahead of us? He hates abortion. He hates the shedding of innocent blood. And, it is a spiritual battle. And that's why I always say that. I always say, for me personally, I feel that your spiritual life is very important because it's such a demonic, evil battle to kill an innocent child. And we can see there with the figures in the UK and now Ireland and here, something has to change. Something has to stop. there has to be a transformation of this world to stop the killing of these innocent children. So, whilst you're fighting the evil, Ephesians 6 says it very clearly, we need to put on the whole armour of God, because the battle is not against flesh. So, I've always invested in my faith, and I know that's what sustains me. Just, Lord, give me the,
what
the
would you say to a young person who is afraid to share their pro-life beliefs with friends or on campuses or even just in work?
I fully understand that, because we are living in different times, and probably when I started out 29 years ago, and others like me, social media plays a big part on persecuting young people who stand up for what is right. I just feel they should stay very close in their faith. But we're living in very challenging times, and we do need sacrificial people. The babies are sacrificed in the womb, and God's maybe calling us and young people to sacrifice our life. It's fair. I know the difficulty, and I would really pray for an uprising of young people, a new revolution of young people that will stand up. It's a personal commitment, and I think I meet with lots of young people here who go to university, and they're really scared because they feel they're being persecuted, and we lost so many young people over the years because, if you shared their picture up on the Precious Life page or Youth for Life page, they got bombarded, they got, crucified on social media. So it does take you to be strong in your faith to keep going. I mean, I lost lots of friends over the years. I started out in Precious Life when I was there in early 30. And I mean, that's not overly young, but at the same time, nowadays, even people who work are persecuted in their work. But if you stand up, what's that saying? Stand for something, even if you do have to stand alone. And it is a lonely battle, and for this generation of young people, it's not hugely popular to be out there in the public. Young people stop with me in the street and say, "I'd love to do this," but I would, if you speak about it in school or if you speak about it in work, you're attacked.
You're attacked. And you can tell us then, I know there's safety in numbers, so you can tell us a bit more about your event. I think you touched briefly on it, that's happening in July. Can you share with our viewers a bit more information about that?
Yeah, well, we are coming together to rally for life, liberty and faith. And we're going to be a voice for the unborn children of Ireland, the UK, the world. So we'll be meeting at Belfast City Hall at 1:30 on the 4th of July. And we'll have the march around the city. It's very similar to the March for Life UK. As I say, we'll have speakers. We're still agreeing some of the speakers. We have a mass before for those from the Catholic tradition in St. Malachy's at 12 o'clock. So it's going to be, a powerful day. Yes, we have to celebrate life. We have to celebrate that every child is precious, but we also have to remember all those children who have been lost to the horror of abortion. So, it's exciting. And if there's anyone listening who'd like to come and help, especially young people, I just watched there over the last few days the march in Italy, and it was amazing, upbeat. I was there one time years ago. I went to a conference in Rome, and we went to the Italian march, and it's very uplifting. So we want to make it an uplifting, celebrate life, but also remember that the battle isn't over. The battle will never be over while unborn children's lives are at risk. That, as I say, because of your involvement in the UK, but it will be one day. It will one day, if those of us continue to stand and work to make abortion unthinkable and illegal once again. And we can do that by raising the banner for life. And these events are very important. The March for Life in the UK is very important, coming up in September, and as I say, here in July, and we all should attend. And hopefully this year I'll get to the March for Life in the UK. It always comes at a bad date for me. I think everything looks good.
Might see each other. Well, thank you so much, Bernadette, then, for sharing your story and giving us your time to get to know you more. And keep up the fantastic work. You're so needed where you are. So thank you so much.
And you too, Catherine. Thank you. I know those in the movement, the little unsung heroes that people don't see, but they're very, very much. They're the wind behind us all. They keep us all going. So we have to appreciate one another. So
exactly.
Thank you, Catherine, for all the work of SPUC.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much, Bernadette.
The first reported euthanasia of a child under the age of 12 in the Netherlands has sparked renewed concern about the direction of assisted dying laws and the protection of society's most vulnerable members. Dutch authorities confirmed that a child was euthanised after regulations introduced in 2024 extended eligibility to children aged between 1 and 12 in exceptional circumstances. The case marks a significant milestone in a country that has steadily expanded euthanasia legislation since legalising the practice for adults in 2002. What began as a measure for competent adults facing terminal illness has gradually widened to include infants, children, and individuals suffering from psychiatric conditions. Campaigners have questioned whether a civilised society should respond to suffering by ending life rather than intensifying care, support and investment in palliative medicine. The Netherlands has proved that legal safeguards erode over time as exceptional cases become accepted precedents. The Dutch government maintains that strict conditions apply and that parental consent is required. However, opponents say the death of a child under 12 demonstrates how rapidly the boundaries of euthanasia can shift once the principle of intentionally ending human life becomes accepted in law. New figures for Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics reveal a continuing decline in abortion applications, particularly among teenage girls, prompting renewed discussion about how society supports women facing unexpected pregnancies and protects unborn children. The report shows that 14,608 applications for abortion were submitted in 2024, continuing a long-term downward trend. Applications from girls under 19 accounted for just 5.8% of the total, down dramatically from 14.3% in the previous year. Observers have welcomed the reduction, describing it as evidence that fewer young women are facing crisis pregnancies. While Israel's abortion rate remains lower than that of many Western countries, campaigners have pointed out that the decline in overall numbers shows that reducing abortion need can come not just through legal restrictions alone, but also through practical support, education, and assistance for mothers and families. A growing international coalition of governments has launched a declaration at the United Nations calling for a global moratorium on surrogacy, arguing that the practice undermines the dignity and rights of both women and children. The initiative follows mounting concern from human rights advocates, legal experts and UN officials about the rapid expansion of the global surrogacy industry. Supporters of the declaration contend that surrogacy transforms motherhood and childhood into contractual arrangements, placing the desires of adults ahead of the welfare of women and the interests of children. They point to warnings from UN Special Rapporteur Reem Al-Salem, who has argued that surrogacy can involve exploitation, coercion and the commodification of human life. The declaration comes amid growing scrutiny of an industry valued in the billions of dollars and projected to expand dramatically over the coming decade. Critics argue that financial incentives often drive the market, while women from poorer backgrounds may bear the physical and emotional burdens of pregnancy for wealthier clients. Campaigners backing the initiative say children should never be treated as products of a commercial arrangement or separated from their mothers by design. They are using governments to place the protection of women, children and family relationships at the centre of future international policy. The Alliance for Responsible Citizenship held its annual conference in London this week. SPUC TV was there covering the gathering. This week, SPUC TV has been at the ARC conference in London. The Alliance for Responsible Citizenship brings together thousands of people from across the world, interested in and concerned for the social, the economic, the cultural and the spiritual well-being of Western civilization. We've had a chance to speak to some fascinating people while we've been here.
There seem to be a group of people around the world now who are discontented with the way Western civilization is travelling, and they are trying to remedy it, and I think it very much parallels the challenge that SPUC has. We realise it's something that's gone far wrong in a society that effectively wants to commit suicide. It seems to be doing it in so many levels, so many areas, and it's been picked up by so many people about what's happening in academia, what's happening in business, what's happening in governments. But at the heart of it, a society that chooses to kill its own progeny, to kill the elderly when they're weak, there's something deeply wrong in that. So the pro-life movement, I think, is a key part of the jigsaw. And I think there's a lot of fellow travellers here and who must be open to hearing why, if you move away from recognising the dignity of every human being from the beginning, that's where it starts to go wrong.
The problem is they're not really thinking about what we're actually talking about here now. What are we actually saying when this happens? What we're saying is that the law then has to give doctors, or in Canada also nurse practitioners, then the right in law to kill you. That's what it does. And so with assisted suicide, like the Leadbeater bill, it was a little bit different, but almost the same. But the point is that, they had to come to the reality of what are we actually talking about? And so we respond by saying, well, all these terrible things are happening with euthanasia in Canada and in other places like the Netherlands and Belgium because of the fact that you've said it's okay to kill. And once you've said that, now you've actually crossed the only line in the sand that exists, which is, I can't kill you.
It's been a seismic shift because most of this has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. We've seen this radical shift, which is causing us to have to rethink how we solve the crisis of abortion because it's being delivered in a very different way. So I think that's going to open up for us a very provocative and dynamic discussion, but also it's going to cause all of us to have to really wrestle with how are we going to solve these new challenges that are very daunting.
It says on the websites that they can order them up to 14, 15, 16 weeks into pregnancy. So they're months and months into pregnancy, and I know there's many well-known cases here in the UK where they're taking them 24 weeks, 33 weeks. They're taking them far into pregnancy.
Because you've lost all control over the gestational age.
Exactly. So nobody is checking when you order these pills. You don't have to prove that you're pregnant. You don't have to show how far along you are in pregnancy. Nobody is checking to see what your RH status is, to see will these pills cause you to be sterilized if you take them in the future, or if you sterilized in the future if you take them now. Nobody's checking to see if you have an ectopic pregnancy, and very importantly, no one is checking to see if you're a woman.
I'm Peter Kearney, and that was SPUC TV News, bringing to light what others hide.
I can see in my mind's eye rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends who gave their lives. For what? The country of today? The sacrifice wasn't worth the result. These are the harrowing words of the then 100-year-old Royal Navy veteran, Alec Penston, who participated in the D-Day landings and died recently. Many look at the Britain of today and lament the almost unrecognisable country. We used to be plucky, a tapestry of salt-of-the-earth communities with grafters leading families, always backed by a knowledge of God. How things have changed. Penston was bitter because he saw men robbed of their futures in the past. I am bitter because I have been robbed of a future that's rightly my inheritance now. I am bitter about what Britain has become, and I am bitter about the path that's led us to this point. We're a nation swimming in the blood of her children. A constitution drained of its beautiful quirks, areas ghettoised by people of hostile and inward-looking faiths and cultures, and an older generation so ensnared by the decadence and hedonism of their youth that I am left despondent. barring attachments to the mythos of the past, I worry that this place is no longer my own. The changing face of Britain amid what's at best a migrant crisis and at worst an invasion is the topic of the day, one which has caused many to mourn the loss of Britain's values and rage against those who refuse to assimilate to our British way of life. But we are living in denial and avoiding a deeply painful question. Did Britain begin dismantling her own identity long before mass migration changed it? I'm Ben Weller, and this is Viewpoint. A colleague of mine at SPUC was driving through her local town, passing a dark sandstone church. Christians had been worshipping there for 127 years. Now it is the Islamic Central Mosque and Learning Centre. It was a Friday and masses of large Islamic families were pouring in. When she reached the shop to purchase a birthday card, she noted an entire shelved section dedicated to Eid greeting cards, whilst a very small selection of First Holy Communion cards hung sadly at the side as a demoted afterthought. It is in our everyday encounters, just like this, that we notice just how quickly the makeup of our country has shifted. Many are concerned and angered by what they view as essentially an Islamic takeover of a Christian country. It is undeniable. Visible Islam in migrant communities appears to be everywhere. But is it just filling a vacuum left by the dwindling Christian faith of the native people? The sadness is understandable, but as Britons always do, we talk about it whilst never doing anything. Our inactivity makes this our fault. Christianity shaped Britain for over 1,000 years, influencing our laws, institutions, education, values and cultural life, and long stood at the centre of national identity. Before the Second World War, the Christian faith was still at the heart of communities, and regular worship was the norm, whilst almost everyone identified as Christian. But from the 1960s, church attendance began to sharply decline, something which is now linked to broader social change, including the sexual revolution and a shift towards individualism. Today, the contrast is stark. Only around 5% attend weekly church services, and fewer than half identify as Christian. Nearly 4,000 churches have closed in the past decade. What was once a defining pillar of British life has become a minority practice. In our hearts, the closure of churches represents more than the mere shutting down of a building. Churches are a visible part of British heritage and were the fabric of society which held our past generations together. Watching them abandoned to crumble and close is like watching your country fall into ruins. As a nation, we spent decades abandoning the pews and turning our backs on God. We diminished the values and institutions that once bound us together. And now, in deep irony, we turn with visceral hostility towards those from other faith groups because they held on to what we chose to discard. Political commentator and campaigns director for Restore Britain, Charlie Downs, found himself in hot water on this very issue. In a tweet, he said that Muslim families are stronger than British ones because they know who they are and prioritise each other. He was then lambasted as an Islam sympathiser. This was not what he was doing. He was calling the British people to a higher standard, one that they once held. In their juxtaposition to Britain's falling birth rate, large foreign families teeming with babies and infants have shown that it's not about housing and jobs. It's about traditional religious worldviews on the family. That's the only way to save this country from demographic collapse. At the start of even this decade, the Great Replacement was a train of thought for conspiracy theorists and the nastier elements of the right alone. At speeds that shock me daily, the Overton window has shifted right, and far fewer people would disavow the suggestion that European peoples are being overrun in their native homeland. The sound and sight of British children is becoming a rarity, whilst large migrant families are becoming the norm. we are uneasy about the ever more real idea of the white British soon being ethnically replaced by growing migrant numbers. This uneasiness around large migrant families is likely deepened by the recent data showing that the fertility rate for England and Wales has fallen to a new record low, whilst the number of babies born to migrant parents in the UK has reached 40%. Only 53% of births were from white British parents. The Church of England allowed contraception in 1930. They endorsed it in 1958. The Abortion Act was passed in 1967. Since then, abortion and contracepting culture has infested society, creating a generation hell-bent on expressing their autonomy and individualism, a view that has been passed down the following generations of ever smaller families. For decades, as a country, we have continuously rejected the beauty and meaning in family and children. Instead of investing in the next generation, people have been encouraged to chase personal gratification and pursue lifestyles that ultimately serve only themselves. Fast forward to 2026, and here we find ourselves with the highest abortion figures on record, as 300,000 preborn children were legally butchered in abortions across the 4 nations of this country. It is sad to see, yet safe to say, that we are the means of our own destruction, our own extinction. We are stuck in a doom loop. We have no children. We immigrate more people. Their cultures allow travesties like the rape gang scandal. We get more scared to raise children. Whilst attending the ARC conference, I found myself at a dinner on the demographic crisis in the West regarding our low fertility rate. It was the same old reheated mess you hear at all birth rate focused events. More housing, more jobs, more money. I'm not opposed to any of those, but their lack is not driving this crisis. Lucy White, a young political commentator, then piped up, asking the panel whether we can ignore migration as a reason for falling birth rates. Her question? Why would European people want to have children in a place they are forecast to become a minority? Would remigration boost our birth rates? She was coldly dismissed by the ageing panel. Yet, for months now, thousands have been rallying in London, protesting the rapid rise in mass migration into the UK, calling for greater controls and renewed action to preserve and protect British values from cultural eradication. Some of these calls come from a place of ethnic nationalism, and some from a place of civic nationalism, the idea that migrants must assimilate. It's a fair request, but leaves another question open. What exactly are British values, and what is the culture that we expect migrants to assimilate into? In a society that now tolerates the notion of truth being fluid or interchangeable, can we even define the British values that we are so keen to preserve? Turning their backs on religion? Slaughtering a third of their own babies? Killing their elderly grandparents? When reflecting on the uncomfortable question of was the sacrifice worth it, the sacrifice of those millions of men, younger than even me, who marched out to face the alleged foe in defence of Great Britain, I say no. Post-war Britain ruined herself. We must have the intellectual courage to address the reality that yes, whilst mass migration has brought with it many issues to Britain, we began dismantling the goodness and beauty of our country long before the migrant arrived to change it. You can't blame them for taking advantage of our weakness and lack of understanding about who we are. We had good times, they created bad men. The bad men created the bad times we live in today. Let's hope the cycle can continue, and out of the ashes of Britain can raise a generation who know who we are. Good men to bring back the good times. That's all we have time for this week. If you're enjoying our content, please like, comment and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or topics you think we should cover, please email us at the address on screen or in the description below. Thank you for watching.